Hello, welcome back to Mountain Jim Card Collectibles. So I hope you're having a great day. So I want to talk about something that I've noticed more and more lately, and there's a lot of talk of people leaving the hobby. I get replies on my videos. I see people talking about it on X. And a lot of sports card hobbyists, that buy into, breaks, breaking companies, this and that, they're more than happy to, push these people out the door. I mean, let's face it, this hobby is not the most welcoming place for a lot of people, unfortunately. I know that you can have a lot of negative interactions in this hobby. Because of that fact, I mean, I've had numerous trolls just come on my channel and just, shit all over me for the most part. And so it's almost like the way I feel as a collector is I don't really feel very welcome in the hobby. Let's face it, as a collector. And, it's just so oriented towards breaking. It's so oriented towards expensive boxes and cards that are just way out of my income range. And I still do sell cards online, but let's face it, it's the fact that sports cards and collecting have become kind of a place where you go and you can expect people to not be nice to you. Let's just put that out there, I wish it wasn't that way. I wish this hobby was more welcoming, but it is what it is. So I ran across this post today, and some people weighed in on this. And, this was posted on January 20th. This comes from Doc. And like it says, I struggle with hobbyists who keep saying they're quitting over and over. I'm so done with this hobby. A few weeks later, breakers get all the good cards, I'm done. A few weeks later, everything is too expensive now, I'm done, bro. Then a few weeks later, they're still posting. If you're really done, just be done. Stop announcing it every few weeks. Just leave already. And to me, that's the hobby in a nutshell. The hobby doesn't want people in the hobby. Which it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand that. I mean, you would expect people in the sports card hobby to want to grow it, but what I have found in the sports card hobby is more and more wealthy type people coming in and just trying to shut the door for one reason or another, and I get that, I've got that. So many facets of living in the USA is you're not welcome here because you're not wealthy enough. You're not buying into the gaslighting, this and that. It is what it is. So let's see what the replies are. It could likely be for engagement with their posts, but it sounds like they aren't really in it for the love of the hobby to me. Well, maybe they were at one time, but so many people have been priced out of this hobby because of the monopoly. Known as Topps Fanatics. I mean, it is just taking people out. That's all it is. I collect because it's memories my kids and I will remember. I'm sure of it. You know why I'm sure of it? Because I remember doing that same thing with my dad and brother and cousins. It's not about the money, seriously. Do I sell cards? Yes. But I sell what I don't PC, and I try to find folks who I know who aren't just trying to flip. But that's hard these days. Yeah, I mean, some people, they look at, flippers, this and that, like, you're trash, for flipping cards, whatever. I flip cards, I flip the cards that I don't want in my collection, To me, it's just part of the hobby, but more and more people, I guess, are frowning on that as well. I just bought a PSA Mickey mantle. I'm so done with the hobby until next week. Well, these are wealthy people that can afford the hobby. Let's face it. And I think that's the issue here is you have to have a lot of money to really enjoy the hobby. And I know that people will come at me. Well, you can buy singles. You can buy 90s. You can buy 80s. You can, live your card collecting hobby the way you want to live it because you're poor, and there's still some crappy, no good cards out there that won't be valued or worth anything. Hey, that's just for you. And a lot of us are going, no, I don't want that. I would like the hobby back where it used to be, affordable. I think they're using the word done as a synonym for fed up, or maybe just done with opening boxes because, man, it has gotten expensive in the basketball world. Well, it's not just the basketball world. It's the sports card collecting world in general. I mean, if you're going to rip open boxes, it costs a lot of money, Everything costs a ton of money these days. They are addicted gamblers. That's the problem. Well, yeah, I mean, when I look at sports cards, it just feels like I'm looking at sports betting. I mean, it really does. I mean, you can't say it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like the hobby felt, 25, 30 years ago. That's for sure. As the saying goes, this isn't an airport. They're not leaving. They're waiting for people to tell them to stay, weirdos. Well, I don't really know if they are. And the reason why I say that is because when people leave the hobby, it just becomes silent, The sound of silence. And I guess that's what a lot of sports card people want, is the sound of silence. They don't want, any negativity. They just want to keep, going into breaks, worshiping breaking companies, kissing their asses day and night, hey, that's great for you. And then selling the card immediately because they're not collectors. They're just investors that look at cards like golden tickets, It is what it is. It's been hijacked by a bunch of, shady investors. Can't pretend it hasn't. And then, Michael Rubin and PSA goes along with it, the scumbags. Yeah, when everyone leaves, you're going to be crying for people to come back, dumbass. The only reasons there's money in it is because of the people. Now that money is the only focus, everyone will indeed leave, except for the money-hungry weirdos. Yeah, and that's just it. It almost feels like it's turning into a hobby for the Logan Pauls, the big, social media influencers so they can game the system and make a lot of money, It doesn't really feel like it's made for average people anymore. And then you're adding the drama by posting about, like these guys that spend all day complaining about people that complain. That's kind of funny. So, that's the nature of this hobby, is there's a lot of people always giving you the bird in this hobby, isn't there? For a lot of reasons, for maybe not towing the line for breakers and this and that, but the sense that I get overall, from people entering and leaving this hobby is, I try to dig into it, what could we call it, and, Google Gemini AI Overview, they try their best. They call it learned helplessness or derealization or symbolic interaction of what happens to people when they leave this hobby for a lot of reasons, The condition described where a person is exposed to unattainable goals or objects, leading to disengagement, is closely related to learned helplessness, where repeated failures result in giving up. In a context of persistent, unrealized desire causing detachment, it can resemble derealization, where the world feels surreal or unattainable. I mean, if you're into collecting and you want awesome cards, so much of it really does feel unattainable, with the big, massive prices, or even just kind of normal prices on boxes, to the point to where eventually you'll wake up in the morning, you're not even thinking about it anymore. Learned helplessness, a psychological state where an individual continuously exposed to uncontrollable, negative, or unattainable situations stops trying to change them, having learned that their actions are futile. And I could say that as an adult, I mean, when I was younger, I'd want to change the world, change things. Oh, I can change the world. But eventually you sit back and go, yeah, all the stuff I tried to do to change the world, none of it mattered. It didn't change at all. And now I'm experiencing learned helplessness. Yeah, welcome to being an adult, huh? And of course, derealization / detachment. A form of dissociation where the person feels detached from their surroundings, often describing the world as dreamlike, unreal, or distant. Yeah, and I can see that in sports cars too. If you're always, watching videos of breakers, hooting and hollering that, hey, they hit another big one of one, like Filth Bomb Breaks, is always getting the rarest of the rare, I can see where derealization and detachment enters the hobby to where, yep, we're just closing that door. And when people close the door on this hobby, I think what happens is they just wake up and they're just living their lives, They're just not even thinking about the hobby anymore. Symbolic interaction. The situation often mimics the classical carrot and stick scenario, causing profound psychological frustration and eventual emotional resignation. Yep. Classic carrot and stick. You can't ever seem to get the carrot, And eventually you just become frustrated and resign. And that to me is what's going to start happening more and more in this hobby because of Topps and Fanatics and the way that they're operating the hobby. They've really, heightened up the carrot and stick ideology, haven't they? Hey, if you want nice cards, buy a box. Oh, you can't afford the box? Buy into a break. Oh, you can't buy into a break? Oh, well, then just go do something else. You know what I mean? And what gets me is so many people in the hobby are going along with it, And eventually they're going to feel it and go, why aren't there more people in this hobby? Well, that's because you've allowed it to go to a monopoly, You've allowed it to go to breakers. You have taken it away from collectors for the most part, Even collectors who try to, buy from Topps Direct, they just can't ever seem to get what they want, And so eventually all this begins to, pile up and people leave the hobby. And maybe they'll come back, when the hobby booms again for one reason or another. But do you see any, future pandemics that would create that or any, anything in the future that's going to cause that? I just don't see that. And so to me, what I see with the way things are set up in the hobby currently is a downward spiral. That's going to be kind of slow, but then it's going to start to pick up more and more to the point to where, you're just going to not see many people talking about it. You have your influencers on YouTube, you have your favorite channels, you have your breakers on YouTube that will, turn this into a spectator sport for collectors, because collectors can't even afford to buy those cards most of the time. The way that I see the hobby set up right now is it's gonna tank eventually. And I know that there's a lot of, people that want people like me out of the hobby because I can't afford, to get into breaks and to buy these big boxes. And it's not just me, it's a lot of other people that I feel like, the people who are tied in with the breakers are trying to push out, And I just don't understand where they believe this hobby is going to go without collectors or people like us in it, Do they think that having a very, very few limited people in this hobby is good for the hobby? I don't see that. You have to have people who are interested in autographed cards. You have to have people interested, in rare cards and, athletes. And so, unfortunately, with the way that a lot of sports card people act, if anything, TCG, at least the bigger TCG properties will continue to boom. The smaller TCG will continue to go down the toilet. But eventually you're going to see a lot of sports cards, as far as content goes, as far as the hobby goes, as far as interest goes, it's going to start to tank. And who do you blame for it? Do you blame the sports leagues? You could. Do you blame Michael Rubin? You could. Do you blame the hobbyist who sticks up for breakers over, say, collectors who've been in the hobby for a long time, who've been priced out? Yes, that's going to be another factor. I know that a lot of these big YouTube channels, they will never admit that the hobby will be dying when it is dying, But overall, with that post I went over, from X, That's not a nice post at all. It's just a really, divisive post. You're going to see this hobby get more and more divisive, kind of like our politics these days, And I don't know why it has to go down the toilet like that, Why this hobby has to become so divisive towards people who are expressing their opinions that can't afford it. You know what I mean? To the point to where, you just feel like you're not even welcome in the hobby anymore. And you see, that's kind of another red flag, is if you're going to have a lot of toxic people in this hobby, you're not going to be attracting many people into it, And I think that, maybe these guys think they're acting tough by, pushing more and more people out of the hobby or telling them just to leave for good and stop posting about and this and that. No, like I said, when this hobby dies, you're not going to get a lot of voices out there. You're not going to get a lot of content. You're just going to get what I've become accustomed to here in Montana at certain times, and that's just silence. Anyway, I'd like to thank my subscribers. I'd like to thank my viewers who haven't subscribed. And honestly, I don't know where this hobby is going at this point, but what I've noticed the most is, especially this year and last year, is how this hobby has become so divisive. And hopefully it changes. Anyway, hope you have a great day. I'm out of here. Bye.